The day my father called me a worthless degenerate, I authorized a transfer that would quietly ensure the foreclosure of his home within a year. He didn't know it, but that single action was my last, desperate act of love, a chance for him to finally face the reality he'd spent a lifetime ignoring. My name is Clara, and at 30, I had built a tech company valued at $30 million from the ashes of my family's expectations. My father, Arthur, was a man carved from granite and spreadsheets. For 40 years, he was a senior accountant at the same mid-sized firm in suburban Michigan, a place where ambition was measured by the quiet accumulation of a pension and the steadfast avoidance of risk. His world was contained within the four walls of his home office, a sterile room that smelled of aging paper and Windex, where every pen was aligned perfectly parallel to the edge of his desk blotter. To him, the world was a ledger book, and the only path to a positive balance was a 4-year degree, followed by a salaried job with benefits. My mother, Eleanor, a kind but timid woman who taught kindergarten, served as the silent endorser of his rigid worldview. I remember her as a creature of soft gestures and whispered apologies, often for conflicts she hadn't started. A buffer between Arthur's rigidity and the world, I was the glitch in their perfectly calculated system. My older brother, Leo, and younger sister, Sophie, were model entries in their ledger. Both excelled in school, followed the prescribed path to state university, and secured respectable jobs, Leo in finance, Sophie in marketing. They were predictable, reliable assets. I remember the pride on Arthur's face when Leo brought home his acceptance letter for a summer internship at a bank. It was a firm handshake, a clap on the back, arare, unfiltered smile. That same week, I had landed my biggest client yet for my nascent web business. But when I mentioned it, Arthur had merely grunted, not looking up from his newspaper. "Don't get distracted, Clara," was all he said. I was a variable, an anomaly they never learned how to account for. My entrepreneurial spirit manifested early, not in lemonade stands, but in ways that deeply unsettled my father. At 14, during the peak of MySpace, I learned basic HTML from forums and online tutorials, spending hours in the glow of my monitor. I charged local businesses, the pizzeria, the dry cleaner, $50 to create and optimize their profiles, adding glitter graphics and embedded music players that were, at the time, the cutting edge of digital marketing. The thrill wasn't just the money, which I kept in a loose-lidded shoebox under my bed, but the active creation of making something from nothing that solved a problem. Arthur discovered my ledger of clients and payments once. "It's a fad," he declared at the dinner table, his fork pausing midair as he fixed me with a look of deep disappointment. "Clara needs to be focused on her SAT prep. Not these internet games. They won't pay the mortgage." In high school, while Leo was captain of the debate team and Sophie was treasurer of the student council activities that shone on college applications, I was in my bedroom, surrounded by the guts of dismantled computers. The smell of ozone and hot dust was my perfume. I ran a small but profitable side hustle, fixing corrupted hard drives and removing viruses for neighbors. Charging a fraction of what the local repair shops did, I made nearly $5,000 by graduation. A fact I kept hidden after my father dismissed my first $1,000 as lucky money that should be put into a savings bond and forgotten. The disapproval was a constant, low-grade hum in our house, the background noise to my adolescence. The pressure became a physical weight. So I folded. I enrolled in community college, majoring in business administration. It was his victory, and I could feel it in the way he spoke about my sensible choice to his friends. For me, it felt like trying to breathe underwater. The classrooms were beige and sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like dying insects. I sat through lectures on SWOT analysis and Keynesian economics from textbooks a decade out of date, taught by professors who spoke of business as a theoretical science. One professor, a man with patches on the elbows of his tweed jacket, droned on about a marketing funnel model from 1985. As he spoke, I was mentally debugging a line of PHP code for a client's website. In my mind, a million miles away, in a world that was alive, chaotic, and real. The classroom was a cage built from my father's fears. After one suffocating semester, I knew I couldn't continue. I spent 3 weeks writing a formal business plan for an e-commerce platform, complete with market analysis, 5-year revenue projections, and a detailed operational strategy. I presented it to my parents in the living room, my hands trembling as I laid the bound document on the coffee table. The ensuing argument was not a single explosion, but a week-long siege. "You are throwing your future away," Arthur's voice boomed, rattling the framed family photos on the mantelpiece. His face became blotchy and crimson, a mask of fury I knew all too well. It was more than anger. It was a deep, profound sense of betrayal. He slammed his hand on the coffee table, and my mother flinched. "You think you're special. You think these little internet schemes are a career. It's a fantasy. And you will come crawling back when it fails. No daughter of mine is going to be a dropout, waiting tables for the rest of her life because she thought she was smarter than everyone else." My mother just sat there, twisting her hands in her lap, her eyes pleading with me to relent, to restore the peace. I left a week later, at 19, with my $5,000 and a duffel bag of clothes. My first apartment was a shoebox on the edge of town where the sirens were a nightly lullaby and the scent of damp despair clung to the hallways. For 2 years, I lived on instant noodles and coffee, working 18-hour days fueled by a toxic cocktail of terror and ambition. My first 2 ventures were spectacular failures. A subscription box for artisanal coffee collapsed when my main supplier went bankrupt, leaving me with a room full of expensive, unsellable beans. I remember the cloying, sweet smell of failure that filled my tiny apartment for weeks. A mobile app designed to connect local volunteers with nonprofits was beautifully coded but horribly marketed. A digital ghost town. Each failure was a brutal, private lesson. A whisper in my ear that sounded suspiciously like my father's voice. The turning point arrived in the form of a mentor. A woman named Isabella, who I met at a small tech networking event held in the stale basement of a co-working space. She was 20 years my senior. A sharp, no-nonsense programmer with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through my frayed blazer and nervous energy. She didn't ask about my degree. She asked what problems I was trying to solve. "Formal education teaches you to follow a map," she told me over coffee later that week, her gaze direct and unwavering. "The real world teaches you how to draw the map when you're lost in the woods. You're a map maker." Clara. For the first time, someone saw my unconventional path not as a failing, but as a strength. With her guidance, I refined my third idea. At 22, I launched Artisan's Bridge, an e-commerce platform dedicated to connecting small, independent American craftspeople with a national customer base. The early days were a blur of sacrifice. I worked from my tiny apartment, the server racks blinking next to my bed, the boxes for shipping stacked so high they blocked the only window. Then, a popular design blogger discovered a ceramicist from Vermont on our platform and featured her work. The effect was instantaneous. My phone and laptop began to chime with sale notifications. Affrantique. Beautiful symphony that grew louder and faster until it was a constant roar. The server crashed. I stayed awake for 72 hours straight, on the phone with a freelance developer, my fingers flying across the keyboard answering customer emails, my body thrumming with adrenaline and caffeine. In that single weekend, we generated $20,000 in revenue. My first instinct, a deeply ingrained, foolish hope, was to call my parents. My voice was buzzing with a desperate, childish excitement. I wanted them to finally see. My father's reaction was a cool bath of skepticism. "Well, that's nice, dear," he said, the sound of a golf tournament audible in the background. "Just be careful. These things can be a flash in the pan." The college admissions office is always there when you're ready to get serious." His words didn't just sting, they cauterized something inside me. The soft, yearning part of me that craved his approval began to harden into something cold and dense. That night, sitting in the dark of my apartment, illuminated only by the glow of the sales dashboard, I looked at my reflection in the screen. I didn't see a daughter seeking approval. I saw a CEO. I called my lawyer the next morning. We established a blind trust. The first major transfer of funds was for my mother's unexpected knee surgery. I funneled $80,000 through the trust, which then paid the hospital directly. My father later told me on the phone about the miraculous, anonymous donor their insurance company had located, his voice full of wonder. I felt a chill snake down my spine. It was then I decided every dollar I ever gave them would be a ghost. Untraceable to me, but structured legally as a callable, zero-interest loan. It was a failsafe, a secret fortification built around a heart that was learning, slowly and painfully, to protect itself. The next 5 years were a relentless, caffeine-fueled climb. Artisans Bridge grew at a pace that was both exhilarating and terrifying. We scaled from a 3-person operation in a cramped, converted warehouse loft that always smelled of stale coffee to a full floor in a gleaming downtown tech building with over 50 employees. The initial 27 artisans became 500 seasons, then 1,000. A sprawling network of American creators whose livelihoods were increasingly tied to the ecosystem I had built. I crossed the $1 million annual revenue mark alone in my office late one night, celebrating not with champagne, but with a quiet sense of disbelief as I watched the numbers tick over on a dashboard. The company was valued at $10 million, then 20, then 30 after a glowing profile in Forbes brought a flurry of attention from venture capitalists. I turned down every acquisition offer, clinging fiercely to the control I had fought so hard to win. By day, I was a CEO. I led board meetings, negotiated multi-million-dollar logistics contracts, and made decisions that affected the lives of hundreds of employees and thousands of artisans. I was decisive, respected, and in complete command of my world. But by night, when a text from my family would light up my phone, I would instantly shrink. I became the 19-year-old dropout again. The family disappointment. They knew I ran a website business and that it was doing well. A phrase they used with the same faint praise they might offer a child who had won a ribbon at a school fair. I never corrected them. Their initial, searing disapproval had built a wall around that part of my life, and I didn't know how to tear it down. Some wounded part of me still hoped they would one day really ask, about my work. But the questions never came. Despite the emotional chasm, I continued to be their silent benefactor. When Leo complained about being priced out of the housing market, despite his recent promotion at the bank, I heard the genuine stress in his voice during a call with my mother. Through the trust, I arranged for $150,000 to be released to him, disguised as a settlement from a distant great-uncle's estate. He accepted the money without a single question about its obscure origins, his relief quickly morphing into entitlement. A week after closing on a house far grander than he could have afforded, he called me. "You should really think about getting a proper job, Clara," he'd said, his voice oozing concern. "This online thing is great as a hobby, but you need a 401k. Real benefits. It's time to grow up." I remember clutching the phone, a cold, silent rage building in my chest. When Sophie's fiancé lost his job 6 months before their lavish wedding, I saw her dream beginning to crumble. I wired $75,000 from the trust directly to the venue and caterer to cover the outstanding balance. Sophie knew it came from me. At a family gathering, I overheard her telling a cousin that my little website business had a lucky year, and I was just happy to chip in. My contribution, my hard-earned success, was reduced to a footnote, a happy accident. The disconnect between my reality and their perception was a constant, grinding ache in my soul. As my father's 65th birthday approached, I made a decision. I was done living 2 lives. I was tired of the charade, of minimizing myself to make them comfortable. I would finally tell them the truth. Not to boast, but to try and build a bridge across the canyon of misunderstanding. I created a fully funded retirement portfolio for them. A substantial gift meant to ensure their comfort for the rest of their lives. It was my olive branch. My proof that my unconventional path had led to a place of stability and generosity. I rehearsed the conversation in my mind for weeks, convinced that the sheer, undeniable weight of my success would finally earn me a measure of their respect. I could not have been more wrong. The evening of the party began with a suffocating familiarity. Their house was a museum of my childhood. Frozen in time, the only new addition was a massive flat-screen television, a recent gift from Leo, displayed in the living room like a trophy marking his legitimate financial success. The pre-dinner conversation was a performance of their achievements. Leo spoke of his portfolio's performance. Sophie detailed her latest marketing campaign's triumphant metrics. My life, my work, to remain devoid, they politely ignored. As dessert was served, I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dad? Mom? Everyone. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I have some news about my company I'd like to share. My father nodded absently, already cutting a slice of cake. Artisan's Bridge was recently valued at $30 million. I said, the words feeling foreign in that room. And I've been featured in Forbes. The silence that followed was absolute. A vacuum that sucked all the air from the room. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Leo just stared, his jaw slack. My father was the first to recover, his face tightening into a dismissive scowl. What does that even mean? Clara, he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. These internet companies, they use all sorts of funny math for those valuations. I tried to explain, breaking down our revenue streams, our growth trajectory, the 50 full-time employees. Before I could finish, Leo interrupted with a short, sharp laugh. So, you got lucky with this online thing. That's great, he said, emphasizing the word lucky. But some of us have been building real careers, with actual qualifications. It's not luck, I said, my voice dangerously calm. It's 8 years of 18-hour days. I pressed on, handing my father the envelope with the retirement account documents. This is for you. I wanted to make sure you're both taken care of. He opened it. As he read, his expression shifted from confusion to something dark and ugly. His hand, I noticed, trembled slightly. A flicker of insecurity before it was consumed by rage. What is this? He finally spat, dropping the papers on the table as if they were contaminated. Charity, are you trying to buy your way back into this family's good graces? That's not it at all, I pleaded, my voice cracking. I just wanted to help, the same way I helped with Mom's surgery. And Leo's house? And Sophie's wedding. 3 heads snapped toward me. The secret was out. My sister Sophie looked mortified, a flush of shame coloring her cheeks before she looked down at her plate. Leo's face hardened into a mask of pure resentment. You, my father sputtered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. That was you playing the big shot behind our backs with your funny internet money. His voice rose with each word. You drop out of college, disappear into your little fantasy world, and now you come back here, throwing money around like you're better than us. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. His napkin fell unheeded. You think your money makes you successful? He roared, leaning over the table, his eyes boring into me. You are still just an uneducated, worthless degenerate who got lucky. Anyone can get lucky. The world stopped. My mother whispered his name. Arthur. A sound too faint to matter. I looked around the table, searching for an ally, for a single glance of support. I found none. Leo wore a faint, triumphant smirk. Sophie was staring intently at her dessert plate. A portrait of cowardice. "I think I should go." I whispered. "Yes, you should." My father snarled, his voice low and venomous. "Get out of my house. Your money doesn't make you one of us." I walked out of that house in a state of shock, my body moving on autopilot. I got into my car, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. As I drove, the streetlights smeared into blurry streaks through my tears. A few blocks away, I had to pull over, my chest seizing. A full-blown panic attack ripped through me, leaving me gasping for air, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. In the sterile quiet of a hotel room later that night, the cruel irony of my situation crashed down on me. I was the millionaire founder of a nationally recognized company, and I was an outcast in my own hometown. The pain was a physical thing, a shard of ice in my heart. But as the hours passed, the pain began to crystallize into something else. Something cold, hard, and clear. I pulled out my laptop, opened the secure file containing the trust documents, and reviewed the callable loan clauses I had put in place years ago as a shield. Then, I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer's emergency line. "David," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "It's Clara. I need you to activate the recall provisions. All of them. Start the process tomorrow morning." The days that followed were a blur of sterile hotel rooms and hollow conversations with my executive assistant, who arranged for my belongings in Michigan to be packed and shipped with ruthless efficiency. I instructed her to sell my condo and donate most of its contents. I wanted no artifacts from my old life, no physical reminders of the person who had tried so desperately to earn her family's love. The flight to California felt like an escape. As the plane broke through the perpetual gray overcast of a Michigan autumn and into the brilliant, boundless blue of the upper atmosphere, I felt a profound sense of severance, a painful tearing away of something that had been part of me for my entire life. I bought a house in Carmel by the sea, a sleek, modern structure of glass and cedar perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. I'd seen it online and purchased it, sight unseen, drawn to the promise of its clean lines and the vast, indifferent ocean. The first few weeks, the house felt like another upscale hotel, its spaces filled with tasteful but soulless furniture, chosen by a staging company. It was a beautiful cage, and I rattled around inside it, the silence amplifying the echoes of my father's words. "Worthless degenerate." The phrase would ambush me at odd hours while watching the waves crash against the rocks below, or standing in the state-of-the-art kitchen, unable to summon the energy to cook. My therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, a woman whose calm, insightful voice became my anchor in twice-weekly video sessions, helped me understand the complex machinery of my family's dysfunction. "Your success wasn't the trigger, Clara," she explained one afternoon, as I sat on my deck wrapped in a blanket against the sea breeze. "It was the accelerant. It ignited a resentment that was already there. Your father's identity is inextricably linked to being the provider, the authority on success. You built an empire that dwarfed his entire life's work. And you did it by breaking every rule he holds, sacred to him. You didn't just succeed, you invalidated his entire belief system." Her words were a key, turning a lock I didn't even know existed. I began a grueling process of emotional excavation, journaling for hours, tracing the patterns of dismissal and minimization back through my childhood. I started reclaiming my house, making it my own. The generic art came down, replaced by bold, original pieces from emerging artists I found through Artisan's Bridge. The beige linen bedding was swapped for hand-stitched quilts from a woman in North Carolina whose business I had saved from bankruptcy. Each object became a testament to my true identity, a celebration of the creativity and resilience my family had refused to see. My home began to feel like a fortress, a sanctuary built not of stone, but of self-worth. The plan I had set in motion with my lawyer proceeded with cold, legal precision. David informed me that the recall notices had been sent via certified mail, The one to Leo regarding the $150,000 inheritance for his house, and the one to Sophie's wedding venue for the $75,000 balance. He also sent a formal notice to my parents' mortgage lender, informing them that the private trust that had been making supplemental payments on their behalf for years, a detail I had left out at the dinner. A secret safety net I'd woven for them, was ceasing all future contributions. The foreclosure wouldn't be immediate, but the countdown had begun. It was a drastic, terrible action, and waves of guilt would wash over me, making it hard to breathe. But then I would remember the triumphant smirk on Leo's face, and Sophie's silent complicity, and the guilt would recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The media exposure happened by accident, a misstep in my carefully constructed new life. I had agreed to fund a new wing for a local artisan co-op in my old Michigan hometown, a project spearheaded by one of the first woodworkers to join Artisans Bridge. I did it anonymously through the company's philanthropic arm, but a junior marketing employee, trying to be helpful, included my name as the founder in a press release. A local business journal picked it up. That small story, "Local Founder Gives Back," was then discovered by a freelance journalist for Forbes who was working on a piece about tech founders from non-traditional backgrounds. My story, the college dropout who built a $30 million tech company from scratch, was too good to pass up. The resulting article was a detailed, flattering deep dive into my career. It went viral on LinkedIn. That was how they found me. 3 weeks after I moved into my Carmel home, my brother Leo appeared on my doorstep unannounced. He stood on my granite porch, dressed in a crisp button-down and pressed chinos, looking utterly out of place against the wild, windswept backdrop of the Pacific coast. "Nice place," he said, whistling as he stepped past me into the foyer, his eyes scanning the high ceilings and the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the ocean. "Really, really nice. What are you doing here?" "Leo," I asked. I didn't offer him a seat or a drink. My sanctuary had been breached. "Family," he said, flashing the easy, confident smile that had always worked on our parents. "And, I have this incredible investment opportunity. A real estate tech startup." I thought, who better to ask for advice? Maybe even a small loan to get in on the ground floor. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He stood there, in the house my success had bought, asking for more, just weeks after he had sat silently and watched me be torn apart. This was the moment I had rehearsed with Dr. ULC. Sharma. Stay calm. State facts. Hold the boundary. That chapter of my life is closed. "Leo," I said, my voice even, "I am no longer funding the family." His smile vanished, replaced by the familiar sneer. "Wow. So that's it. You move into your glass palace on the coast and forget where you came from. Dad was right about you. You really are a degenerate." Dad called me a degenerate after I offered him a fully funded retirement. I reminded him, my voice like ice, and you sat there and smiled. "Is that what you came here to do?" Reinforce his assessment. He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before his anger returned. "Look, he didn't mean it like that. You know how he gets. You embarrassed him." "No," I said, taking a step toward him. I revealed a truth he couldn't handle. "And so did you." I walked over to my desk and picked up a file. I handed him the documents from my lawyer. "This is a copy of the recall notice for the $150,000 you received for your house. It was never an inheritance. It was a callable, zero-interest loan from a trust I control, and I am calling it." He stared at the paper, his face draining of color. He read it, then read it again, his hands starting to shake. "You can't do this," he whispered, the bravado gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. "They'll foreclose. Heather. The kids." "I'm not going to," I said quietly. "Not yet. I'm going to give you a choice. You can go home, And you can tell Mom and Dad the truth about everything. The money, your silence at the dinner, all of it. You will start to make things right. Or, you can walk out that door and pretend this conversation never happened. And in 30 days, my lawyer will file the papers. I watched him. This man, my brother, as the weight of real consequences landed on him for the first time in his privileged life. The power dynamic had shifted. Irrevocably and forever. The choice was his. Leo left without another word. The legal documents clutched in his white-knuckled hand. I watched his rental car disappear down the winding coastal highway. A storm of conflicting emotions churning inside me. There was no triumph. No sweet taste of victory. Just a profound, aching sadness for the brother I once knew. The boy who had taught me to ride a bike. Now reduced to a man whose love was conditional upon my failure. I felt a pang of guilt. Sharp and sudden. For using my power so bluntly. But then I remembered his smirk at the dinner table. The casual cruelty of his silence. And the guilt subsided, leaving behind the cold, clear certainty that this was not revenge. It was a consequence. An overdue lesson in cause and effect. The ripple effects of the Forbes article reached my parents' insulated world, not through Leo, but through their own community. The article was shared among their friends, their colleagues, the members of their golf club. Suddenly, Arthur and Eleanor, the parents of the dropout daughter, were being congratulated. Arthur, I saw that piece on your Clara a $30 million company. You must be bursting with pride. I could picture my father at his weekly Rotary Club meeting. Trapped. Forced to accept the congratulations with a tight, forced smile. The public praise a stark contrast to his private condemnation. The social pressure was a force he couldn't dismiss or control. The first contact came as a text from my mother 2 weeks after Leo's visit. Saw the article about Artisan's Bridge. So impressive. Dear, your father and I are so very proud. There was no acknowledgement of the horrific dinner. No apology. Just a desperate attempt to retroactively claim a pride that had been poisonously absent. A few days later, a voicemail from my father appeared. His voice thick with a false, booming joviality. Clara, big news about your company in the paper. Always knew you had it in you. He lied. Seems there was a bit of a misunderstanding last time we spoke. Give me a call when you have a moment. A misunderstanding. That was his chosen word for the most painful betrayal of my life. I deleted both messages without responding. The final text came a week later. We're thinking of visiting California next month. We'd love to see your new home. The message landed like a stone in my gut. After months of building my fortress, they wanted to simply walk through the gates, as if they hadn't been the ones to lay siege to it. I discussed it with Dr. Sharma, who helped me script a response that was both firm and fair. I texted my mother back. You are welcome to visit, but we need to have an honest and direct conversation about what happened at Dad's birthday dinner. If you are not prepared for that, then you shouldn't come. Her reply was instant. Of course. Dear, we just want to put all this behind us and be a family again. The phrase "put this behind us" was a red flag. A clear sign they wanted absolution without accountability. But I agreed. I arranged for them to stay at a nearby luxury hotel. A crucial boundary to preserve the sanctity of my home. I met them for lunch at a restaurant on a windswept bluff overlooking the ocean. A neutral territory. They looked smaller in the bright California sun. Diminished and out of place. My father wore a button-down shirt and slacks. My mother a structured dress more suited for a Michigan church service. This is really something, my father said, gesturing vaguely at the vast expanse of blue water. You've done well for yourself. The emphasis on "for yourself" was a subtle barb, an attempt to isolate my success from their values. I simply replied, "Thank you," and let the silence hang in the air. Finally, after the awkward small talk had withered and died, my father cleared his throat. About my birthday, he began, staring at his water glass. Things got out of hand. You called me a worthless, uneducated, degenerate, I stated, not as an accusation, but as a fact that needed to be placed on the table. You told me to get out of your house. You said my money didn't make me part of the family. His face flushed a deep, mottled red. I was shocked. He mumbled. It all came out of nowhere. Your success. Learning about the money you'd given. It made me feel like... He trailed off. Struggling. For the first time, I saw a crack in his granite facade. I saw not just a tyrant, but a deeply insecure man whose entire life's narrative had just been invalidated by his dropout daughter. It made me feel like a failure, he finally admitted. The words barely a whisper. It was not an apology, but it was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. I spent my entire life trying to win your approval, I replied, my voice quiet but strong. I hid my successes, so I wouldn't make you uncomfortable. I supported the family financially because I loved you. What I needed in that moment wasn't for you to feel successful. I needed you to be proud of me. We are proud, my mother interjected, her eyes welling with tears. We were just worried. Worry doesn't give you the right to be cruel, I said gently. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it has to be based on respect. Not on my college degree. Not on your idea of a proper career. But on who I am and what I have built. I will not be demeaned again. Those are the terms. They agreed. Their nods stiff and reluctant. Later that afternoon, I gave them a tour of my house. As they stood in my living room, the setting sun igniting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, the tangible reality of my life seemed to finally penetrate their defenses. This wasn't funny internet money. This was a life, a home, a world I had built with my own two hands. On my own terms. My father ran his hand along a handcrafted walnut table. An item from one of our artisans in Oregon. This is quite something, he said, his voice tight with a complex mix of awe and resentment. In that moment, watching them, I felt a profound shift inside me. Their approval, the thing I had chased for 30 years, the ghost that had haunted every decision, simply dissolved. It no longer held any power. I was proud of my home, proud of my company, proud of myself, and their opinion on the matter had become irrelevant. The victory wasn't forcing them to see my worth. It was realizing I no longer needed them to. Our relationship never fully healed. It was reset, reformed into something new and distant. With carefully guarded borders, we spoke occasionally. Our conversations polite but shallow. A few weeks after their visit, a handwritten letter arrived from Sophie. It was long, tear-stained, and full of a genuine, gut-wrenching remorse for her silence, her jealousy, her cowardice. It was the beginning of a slow, tentative rebuilding of our sisterhood. Leo began making monthly payments to the trust. A small, tangible reminder of his choices. My true healing came from an unexpected source. I had established the Mapmaker Scholarship at my old community college, an anonymous fund for aspiring entrepreneurs who, like me, had chosen an unconventional path. 6 months after my parents' visit, a thick envelope arrived. Inside was a letter from the first recipient, a young woman who had started a coding boot camp for underprivileged girls in Detroit. She wrote about her struggles, about the condescension she faced, about how the scholarship wasn't just about the money. It was the first time anyone had ever validated her dream. Knowing that someone out there believed in my internet game enough to invest in it, she wrote, changed everything for me. As I sat on my deck, the letter in my hands and my rescue dog's head in my lap, I looked out at the endless horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant, hopeful colors. My father's words could no longer hurt me, because I had finally found a voice that mattered more my own, and I was using it to help other mapmakers find their way out of the woods. Have you ever had to redefine your relationship with the people you love to protect your own peace? Has your definition of success ever clashed with your family's expectations? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your journey matters, and sharing it can help someone else feel a little less alone on their own path. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about forging your own way. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to build a home within yourself, a place so strong and so true that no one can ever make you feel like an outcast again.